I recently moved into a new home with my closest friend. We'd been saving for years, ever since high school, dreaming of the day we'd finally live together. After months of searching, we stumbled upon a stunning beachside property. The interior had just been renovated, marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a balcony that overlooked the sea. It felt like something out of a dream, the perfect beach house. There were so many people interested in the place that we didn't think we stood a chance. It seemed too good to be real. The owners were an elderly couple who'd clearly cared for the home deeply. They were warm, gentle people. When the agent called to say our offer had been accepted, my best friend cried. I'd never seen her cry before, so I knew how much this meant to her. But what we didn't know was that something else came with the house, something we weren't prepared for. After a few months of finalizing paperwork and adding personal touches, we finally moved in. Everything felt perfect, peaceful, until it didn't. At night, we started hearing creaking sounds. We brushed it off, assuming it was just the wind or the house settling. But then came the smell. At first, we thought it was the salty air from the sea, but we were wrong. It grew stronger, more putrid. It seeped into the walls and hung in the air like rot. We couldn't figure out what was causing it. It was just the two of us living there, and we hadn't brought anything that could decay. 2 weeks passed. Summer was approaching, and with the rising heat, the stench became unbearable. We had no choice but to investigate. The smell seemed to be coming from the storeroom, a space we hadn't used since moving in. That alone was odd. We hadn't stored anything perishable there, and nothing appeared to be leaking. Maybe a dead animal had gotten trapped under the metal rack. We pulled the rack away from the wall, expecting to find a rat or something similar, but there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then, my friend noticed a crease in the wallpaper, something neither of us remembered seeing before. I pressed on it. The wall sounded hollow, and the wood beneath creaked as if it were ready to give way. The closer we got, the worse the smell became. I pushed again, harder this time. The wall cracked open. Behind it was a hidden room. The stench hit us like a wave. It was overwhelming, like death itself had been sealed inside. A swarm of flies burst out, filling the air with buzzing chaos. We screamed and gagged, trying to wave them away. I hesitated, then looked through the opening. What I saw made me vomit instantly. Inside were 2 human bodies, decaying, grotesque, and horrifying. Their faces were barely recognizable, melted and distorted. Their skin was slimy, almost transparent, peeling away in layers. Maggots writhed inside their hollowed torsos, eating away at what little remained. The corpses sat side by side in rocking chairs, holding hands. They rocked gently, as if caught in some twisted loop of affection and decay. We ran. We didn't stop to think. We bolted from the house and called the police as soon as we reached the street. There was no way we could go back inside. We stayed with my parents for a while, trying to process what we had seen. The image haunted us both. A few days later, the police contacted us. The bodies had been identified. They belonged to the elderly couple who had sold us the house. We were stunned. How could that be? We had met them, spoken to them. They were alive when we signed the papers, weren't they? The officers said the couple had been missing for weeks before the sale. Their relatives assumed they had gone on a trip, but no one had heard from them. Somehow, their bodies had been hidden in that sealed room the entire time. The house had been shown and sold without anyone discovering them. We couldn't make sense of it. Had we spoken to imposters? Were the people we met even real? Or was something else at play? The rocking chairs, the way they held hands. It felt like a tragic love story, but twisted beyond recognition. What could have driven them to such a fate? Was it a suicide pact?
A ritual? Or something darker? We never returned to that house. We couldn't. The memory was too vivid, too disturbing. The beach view, the marble counters, the perfect balcony, all of it was tainted now. The house had become a tomb. Sometimes I wonder what really happened. Did they die together willingly? Or were they trapped, victims of something sinister lurking beneath the surface of that beautiful home? I still hear the buzzing of the flies in my nightmares. I still see their hollow eyes and the way their bodies rocked gently, as if waiting for someone to find them. And I still ask myself, what kind of love ends like that? Or maybe it wasn't love at all.
This happened a few months ago, back in the spring. It was that strange in-between period of my life. Just graduated, no real responsibilities yet, and way too much free time. I'd finished school a semester early, which seemed like a great idea when I was drowning in assignments. But once I actually had all this free time, I had no clue what to do with it. My full-time job wasn't starting until June, and most of my friends were still busy with classes or finals. So until then, I was just floating, feeling like I was stuck in the gap between two phases of my life. It was actually really discomforting and made me feel worthless. I'm someone who always needs to be doing something productive. So just sitting around for days on end, watching time pass, was killing me. That's probably why I said yes when my mom asked me to check on my Uncle Rick's beach house. It was an easy favor. Drive down to Rehoboth Beach, make sure nothing was leaking or damaged, and do some small maintenance to save Rick the cost of hiring someone. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that I'm from Pennsylvania and Rick's house is in Delaware, so the drive's not so bad, just a little over 2 hours. The house is massive. The kind that comfortably holds my entire extended family every summer. 25 of us packed into one place, playing games and drinking too much. Those two activities are honestly the only distinctive things about our family. The house isn't exactly on the shoreline, but it's not too far from the beach either. It's nestled in a quieter neighborhood, lined with tall beach grass and winding roads. Fast forward to some random day of the week that I honestly can't even remember. I think it was like a Thursday or something. I left in the late afternoon, which in hindsight was probably a dumb idea. The drive was pretty chill. When I got to the house, everything seemed normal. I made my way inside and ran through Rick's checklist. I checked the faucets, the breakers, and walked the property. Everything looked fine. To be completely frank, it felt strange being there alone. I'd never seen that house without miscellaneous board games sprawled about and crowds of family members noisily drinking. The silence was definitely the most eerie thing about it. The place felt abandoned or something. I'm sure all of you have that one place, be it a house or a restaurant or something else, that gets really rowdy when your whole family spends time there together. Now try to picture that place empty and silent. Kind of spooky, right? Anyway, it was getting late, and I hate driving at night more than anything. So I texted my mom to let her know that I'd just stay overnight and head back in the morning. She told me that was a good idea and reminded me to thank Uncle Rick for letting me stay there, which I did. I made myself some food, messed around on my phone for a bit, and then started washing up for the night. Usually during family gatherings, I'd get jammed into one of the smaller rooms on the third floor, while other relatives got to claim the nicer, bigger rooms. I'm not complaining about the system at all. I'm just telling you how things tended to go. Since I had the house to myself that night, though, I figured I'd take advantage of it. The master bedroom on the second floor has a private bathroom, a massive walk-in closet, and a ridiculously comfortable bed. The decision wasn't exactly difficult. I knew that's where I'd be sleeping. I climbed in around midnight and quickly drifted off. I don't remember what time it was when I woke up, only that something startled me awake. I was still a little groggy,
but I was dead sure a sound had just come from the closet, like something had fallen in there. Without making any noise, I craned my head to look at the closet. Even that small action sent my heartbeat racing. My mind was awake, but my body refused to move, like some kind of sleep paralysis without the paralysis. I could move, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to find out if there was something in that closet. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself to go back to sleep. And I almost did, but the literal second I started drifting back into sleep, I heard it, a muffled thump from inside the closet. I squinted my eyes just a smidge and tried convincing myself I'd imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. As if overcome by some invisible force, I laid there in complete paralysis with no control over my body whatsoever. Not like before. This time, it was real. I couldn't move even if I wanted to. I listened in horror as the closet door slowly creaked. Through barely open eyes, I watched as a dark figure stepped into the room. It just stood there, beside the bed, motionless, watching me. Maybe 20 seconds passed, each second feeling impossibly long. Then, silently, it turned and left the room. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. The footsteps moved across the floor, but instead of heading downstairs like I had expected them to, they actually creaked upstairs to the third floor. My stomach churned. The only staircase led up. There was no exit from there. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but I was too afraid. I couldn't overpower a grown man. I had no idea if he was armed. The only thing I could do was wait. After a few painful moments in my own head, I worked up the courage to snap myself out of the paralysis. Quietly, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. As soon as the dispatcher picked up, I whispered as quietly as I could, telling them someone was in the house. I slipped out of bed and just as quietly turned the lock on the bedroom door. Then I waited. Minutes dragged painfully by until flashing red and blue lights illuminated the windows. I was actually kind of shocked at how quickly the police arrived. I ran down the stairs, threw open the front door, and nearly collapsed in relief when I saw the police. They didn't hesitate. They stormed inside, moving quickly through the house. I waited outside. It didn't take them long. According to them, the house was empty. I was in disbelief. I had heard the footsteps go up, and there was nowhere to go after that, so he must have still been in the house. There was no other explanation. The police insisted he must have slipped past me, that I was too freaked out to notice. I knew that wasn't true, but what could I say? The guy had vanished. I wasn't comfortable letting the police just leave, though, so I called Rick. Rick wasn't having it. He snapped at the police and told them to check again and that my life might have depended on it. So they did. They searched again, more thoroughly this time. Rick told me to follow them and watch what they were doing, and so I did. The officers moved methodically, opening every closet and checking under beds, tapping at the walls like they were expecting something hidden behind them. They pulled back the shower curtain in every bathroom, double-checked the locks on the doors and the windows, and that's when they found it. One of the bedroom windows on the third floor, the room I should have been sleeping in, was unlocked. One of them stood by the door while the other went downstairs and stepped onto the back deck. I opted to go outside with the second officer, mostly because the thought of being locked in the house with some stranger sickened me. The officer shined his light around the property, but there was nothing out there. He started scanning the roof, and to my horror, his beam swept across something terrifying. It was him. It was that stranger that had been in the house. He was just sitting there on the roof. He was this disgusting-looking bald man in tattered clothing who looked like he hadn't seen a shower in years. The next hour was a blur. The cops communicated with each other, and they got the guy off the roof in cuffs. The police said he was probably homeless and squatting in the house for days, maybe longer. But when they asked him how he got in, how long he'd been there, and why he was hiding in the closet, he didn't answer. He just kept that eerie, vacant look, like none of it mattered to him. He was in the back of one of their police cars shortly after that. And that was that. The whole thing was so crazy that it's still hard to wrap my head around. As much as I try, I cannot figure out why that guy had been hiding in that closet of all places. Maybe he heard me enter the house and hid in the first place he thought of. I still don't know how he got into the house. Rick doesn't either. It's impossible to get to the roof from the ground, so I feel like that explanation is pretty illogical. The rest of my extended family has been insisting that Rick ups his home security, but he's refused every time for reasons I can't explain. The thought that, had I been sleeping in my assigned bedroom, that might have ended very differently. About 8 years ago, I lived in a mountain town filled with vacant and abandoned houses. I ended up exploring 2 of them. The first one honestly scared me. It was off a stone road with a few other houses scattered along the way. My boyfriend at the time and I drove there, even though it was less than a mile from where we lived. It had snowed heavily, and there were probably a good 8 inches of snow covering the lot. The house sat back from the road, with a long driveway leading up to it. The first strange thing we noticed was the appliances, stoves, washers, dryers, refrigerators, lining both sides of the driveway. The house itself was large and split level. When you entered through the front door, you could go up a few steps to the main area or down a few steps to the lower level. There were no steps leading to the front door, so we went around to the side. The door had already been kicked in and snow was blowing inside. The house was completely gutted. We stepped in and saw those tall Jesus candles you can get from the dollar store lining both sides of the hallway. There had to be close to 100 of them. We climbed the stairs to the front door, continued up the next set of steps, and stopped in front of a door just to the right of the kitchen, which was at the top of the stairs. Heavy plastic, thick, layered, hung in place of a door, so we couldn't see into the room. Curious, we pushed the plastic aside and stepped in. The room was small. In the center was a folding table with 1 chair, 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 spoon, and a single cup knocked over. The air felt heavy, like whoever had been there last was deeply depressed, maybe even took their own life. But there were no signs of that. No other furniture. Just a closet door slightly ajar. We heard a noise from behind it. Thinking it might be an animal, we opened the door. Inside, hanging on a hook, was a black top hat. Nothing else. I started feeling intense anxiety. The air was pressing in on me. We left the room through the heavy plastic, and I paused at the top of the steps while my ex wanted to check out the hallway. I was too creeped out and told him to hurry. He was maybe 10 steps down the hall when the plastic from the doorway suddenly flew open. I felt a powerful rush of air blast past me and down the stairs. It nearly knocked me over. My ex heard the plastic move and ran toward me, practically picked me up, and I'm not a small person, and we bolted down the steps and out the door straight back to my car. It was terrifying. That plastic couldn't have moved on its own. The second house I explored wasn't scary at all. It was almost comforting. It was a small home that had been vacant for a long time, and the roof was collapsing in. We entered through the front door, and it felt like whoever had lived there just left one day and never came back. I assumed it had belonged to an elderly person who passed away, and no one ever came to clear out the house. Everything was still there. Medicine in the bathroom expired in 1994. Dishes sat on a drying rack next to the sink. A wallet with ID, dentures, everything. It was sad. We explored the house and found tons of fascinating items. An old World War I or World War II uniform, a vintage sewing machine, a record player with stacks of records, and an old parchment paper book of records dating back to the 1890s. It contained railroad information, material costs, letters between family and friends, and business transactions. It was incredible to see. We didn't take anything, but it felt like stepping back in time. I moved away from that area, and a couple of years ago, I drove by that house again. but it's not there anymore. Earlier this year, I was walking outside when I heard my neighbor's children playing in their yard, just beyond the woods behind my house. There were three of them, all girls, ages 4, 7, and 10. I had just brought home an unfinished electric guitar I was building. I'm a luthier's apprentice, and wanted to show it off, since their whole family had shown interest in my work before. So I ran inside, put on my shoes, and grabbed the guitar. Let me paint the setting. I live deep in the countryside on a large farm. Besides my neighbors, my grandmother and 2 uncles also live on the property, though the houses are spaced out so you can't see one from another. Most of the land is divided by mid-sized tracts of woods. It's worth noting that the farm is a family enclave. My neighbors are the only ones who don't share my last name. The entire stretch of the farm borders the Chesapeake Bay. We all have beaches and a stunning view of the water. Living on the eastern shore means we get to watch the sunset over the bay every evening. Anyway, after grabbing the guitar and heading back outside, I could still hear the girls playing. I decided to take my beach route to reach their house. I walked down the hill. My house sits on a cliff with wooded slopes on either side. One slope has a cleared path where trees were cut down, and that's how I accessed the beach. Then followed the shoreline, listening to their laughter as I walked. Eventually, I climbed up the jetty, which led me directly into the large pasture in front of my neighbor's house. As I rounded the edge of the woods and got a full view of the field, I saw no one there. Yet I could still hear voices, though now it sounded more like a casual adult conversation than children giggling. I paused. The sound seemed to be coming from across the pasture, near my neighbor's beach. That didn't strike me as strange at first. Unlike my beach, theirs isn't much of a beach at all, and sometimes vanishes completely during high tide. I figured they might be using the neighbor's beach instead. Still, I considered the possibility that the sound was bouncing off the woods on that side of the pasture, so I walked up to their house to check if they were in the yard on the other side. Guitar in hand, I crossed the grass and rounded the corner to the front door. No one was outside. All the lights were off, and there were no vehicles in the driveway. Weird. But I could still hear voices coming from the beach, so I circled around the house and followed the sound across the pasture. At the far corner, there's a steep slope leading into a patch of woods that had been thinned out years ago. It's more like a small copse now. Before these neighbors moved in, a friend and I had played in that copse and noticed small gravestones scattered around. It turned out to be a pet graveyard, though some of the names were strange for animals, names like John or Bob. Creepy, but kind of fascinating. I climbed up the slope and walked through the graveyard, hoping to get a view of the beach where the voices were coming from, but I couldn't see anything. A thick cluster of phragmites blocked the view. At that moment, I heard loud pops and laughter. I assumed they were setting off black cats or something. My neighbors enjoy fireworks. So I ran back down the hill, out of the graveyard, and along the wooded edge of the pasture. As I walked, I caught the unmistakable scent of a campfire or grill. That explained it. They were cooking on the beach. If they had a fire, they might be tossing black cats or even rocks into it. Rocks can pop and shoot out of flames when heated. So I climbed down the rocks onto the corner of their beach, careful not to damage my guitar, and walked across the stick-littered sand. Another jetty blocked my view, but I could hear them just on the other side. This one had a small concrete wall, so I stepped up onto it and stood tall to look over the other beach. What the hell? The voices, the laughter, the popping, everything stopped the moment the beach came into view. It was completely empty, silent. I was the only one there. That was unsettling. I decided to take the gravel road around the woods to get back to my house, which led me past their house again. Still, no one was home. I kept walking, guitar in hand, back to my place. Strangely, I wasn't scared. I didn't even realize how deeply unsettling the whole thing was until I got back. I've never mentioned it to my neighbors. It's just never come up, even though I visit them at least once a week. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, but that experience, that was eerie.